Hey guys, I just want to make a video commenting about the recent dip in the Bitcoin prices. As we know, we have corrected officially from the all-time high of Bitcoin, which is $58,000, to roughly $45,000 in a matter of 48 hours. And that is a pretty significant drop. It's about almost 25% of correction that we had in this Bitcoin cycle. And among this price correction, we have seen some other news or other information that popped up. Namely, I want to say the comment that Janet Yellen, as well as Bill Gates, two great leader in our financial and economic system, who have commented recently on Bitcoin, and specifically they were voicing their views, how they're bearish on Bitcoin, and they don't think that it's worth much of anything. So this really brought my attention because one of the investment theses I had for Bitcoin is that Bitcoin would be the investment for the next generation. Now, let me explain this because I don't see this investment thesis being brought up too often on YouTube. There are a lot of crypto YouTubers or blockchain experts who are basically comparing Bitcoin to gold. We've seen that many times. But this investment thesis I have, I believe it's quite unique, and we haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. So I'm going to explain why this is the case. My investment thesis for Bitcoin on this specific topic is as follows. Bitcoin is the investment for the next generation, for the future generation. It's not for millennials. It's not for boomers. It's for the Gen Zs, and it's for the 2010s babies. It's for the kids who are born in this generation and their future, and perhaps their kids. Now, why is this the case, right? I mean, we know that for a fact that older people have trouble dealing with technology, and I'm saying this as a very specific statement because one of the first times I experienced this myself was, I remember I was in my probably very early 20s, and I went to elementary school. I was volunteering for a day. I was teaching the kids about financial literacy. I went to a classroom of 12 and 10 years old. And, I was looking, I thought that being our age gap was 10 years, right, in that case. I thought that I can still connect with these kids well. I thought that we're pretty much up to the same things. These kids probably watching YouTube and they are playing games on their phone. It's all the same stuff that we do as young people as well. But that was apparently not the case. I went to the classroom and I saw that these kids were actually playing around with something strange. It was like a very interesting gadget. They were playing around, they're spinning on their desk, they were putting on their hands, they were playing battles with it, doing all the stuff that kids do with toys in a group environment. In the break time, I really took an interest in this, so I went out to see and I asked them, what exactly is this? And of course, as we know, what the kids were playing, they were playing the fidget spinners. But at the time, I didn't know there was something called fidget spinner. I didn't know it was such a hit among the kids, right? Just to show you, what difference stands, just given like a 10 years of age gap. And I think what we are looking at right now with the Bill Gates and Janet Yellen's and perhaps Warren Buffett's comment, one, we're looking at people who were not able to really comprehend this technology well. Now, don't get me wrong, these are some amazing, smart, wise individuals. They are, they've achieved so many things in their lifetime. But I think it's come to an age and time today where their knowledge, their mindset no longer serves the upcoming technology as the world is evolving. Because the world is evolving in such a fast-paced environment. I don't think the people who were born in the same generation could keep up, given 10 or 20 years of age difference. And this gap is only going to accelerate in the next decade, in the next multiple decades. And we could go back in time and look at the time where how humans, Homo sapiens, we're talking about probably from 200,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago, where Homo sapiens emerged and really we dominated the planet, right? There's it's a scientific fact that wherever Homo sapiens go, when they go to a new continent, like Australia, for example, a huge portion, 90% of the wildlife there were wiped out in basically 200 years, as soon as humans came. Why is that? Because the animals, the wild animals on these continents have not evolved enough to have a rational fear of humans. They were hunted by humans, by their crazy technologies. Okay, I say crazy technologies, but really we're talking about, you know, spears and traps, very basic primitive technologies. But the animals who were involved for millennia, perhaps millions of years, some species even, independent of human involvement, they have never seen humans before, and in a couple generations they're all wiped out because their adaptive mechanism, their evolution have not bring them up to date to cope for the rise of the humans and their technologies. So what's really important here is to take note of how fast technology has evolved. If we look at the majority of our scientific achievements in humans are achieved probably, I would say over 90% of them are achieved in the last 500 years, whereas human civilizations have, the culture civilizations have existed for at least 10,000 years, from the ancient Egyptians, the Romans, ancient Chinese. And the 500 years in comparison to 10,000 years, it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's just a little sliver of time that we have comprehend these sophisticated technology that we take for granted on a daily basis right now. But if you look at that scientific achievement and subdivide it, within the last 500 years, the majority of the achievements that we created in the human societies are achieved in the past 100 years. And most recently, that has to do with the invention of the internet. The internet is only around, commercially and widely used internet is only available for, 25, 30 years-ish, right? And that's only an even smaller sliver of time compared to the 500 years of scientific revolution. What I'm saying is we're going through a real change in technology here, no longer within multiple generations. Okay, if you're born in, 10,000 BC, and you're probably using the same primitive technology as the people from 9,000 BC. For 1,000 years, you are using the exact same technology with very modest improvements as your great-great-great-grandfather. Today, it's totally different. Your grandparents and their grandparents are using totally different technology that we are using today. They don't even know what the internet is. They probably have no concept of it. And if you bring those ancestors of yours into the world today, they will probably freak out because they, their brains are wired differently to generate different time, different generation. So what I'm saying is right now we're having life-changing technology within the same generation, within the same generation's lifetime. And that is huge because that means we could have people who are governing our society today, very smart people, very wise people who are probably in their 40s and 50s, that their brains are essentially wired differently compared to the younger generations, compared to the kids who are 10 years old, compared to the 25 years old out there. And they're not able to catch up to these new technology. They're not able to, understand it fast enough to make changes, to adapt to it. And we've seen that with the rise of the big tech, by the way. We've seen how Congress, the U.S. Congress, struggle to understand what Facebook does, what Google does. They can't regulate it. The regulations can't catch up fast enough to regulate these industries. We've seen the rise of Uber. We've seen the gray market being created by these food delivery services, by these taxi cab services. But the regulation, it's always playing a catch-up game with the rising technologies, and they've never caught up because these very form of governance, they were controlled and they were governed by people who struggle to understand the world as we know today. And that is a problem, but it's also an opportunity. It means that the ones who are able to understand the technology, the ones who can make good use and good sense of the technology, would actually make the investment of their lifetime. If you spot a technology today that you think is going to be huge, but these old people, and say old people, what I really mean is people who are less sophisticated and less adaptive in today's technology intensive environment. And these people, compared to those old people, if you're able to understand things that they couldn't, then you effectively created opportunities that become the investment of a lifetime, because these investments are only going to increase in value as the next generation. I'm not talking about you if you're 20 and 30 years old, you're investing in a technology like Bitcoin. Okay, I'm talking about your kids and their kids. When you become a grandfather or grandmother and their kids, they're born in this digital world. They're going to understand Bitcoin technology. They're going to understand technology that we haven't even seen today way better than you do, just because they were born in this age. Young kids, probably 3 years old, 2 years old, they grew up in this information technology world, right? They know how to operate an iPad better than anyone in their 40s and 50s, and they were only 3 years old, right? What I'm saying is that this investment into things like Bitcoin, okay, it's going to be the investment of this generation, and it's going to be the investment of the next generation. And I think that based on this important hypothesis, that Bitcoin could definitely see a gradual rise in value, in appreciation for years to come. This could become a part of your retirement portfolio. It could become a part of your kids' retirement portfolio. We could live in, fast forward 10, 20, 50 years. Let's think about it. It's the year 2070, okay? And for a regular person living in that world today, not today, but in 2070, they could be putting 10% of their savings into something like Bitcoin, versus today's traditional approach, which is building a portfolio with stocks, with bonds, with GICs. Fast forward 50 years, they could be treating Bitcoin as a 10% portion of their portfolio, maybe even more, right? Who knows? What I'm saying is that I see this trend happening, and the fact that older people like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Janet Yellen cannot comprehend this technology enough to even make educated statement about it, it's the proof that they don't understand it well enough. They don't know the full value of this, and it's not their fault. It's because how their brains are wired, and it's hard. Okay, changing the wiring of your brain is difficult. Some people see it, some people don't, but I can guarantee you, the next generation of kids, they are going to see it. Think about someone who were born in 2010. Okay, they're 10 years old now. They were older than Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was created essentially in 2009, so they were older than Bitcoin. In the last Bitcoin cycle, which is 2017, they were 7 years old. Now they're 10 years old. They've seen Bitcoin on the news a lot. Okay, in their childhood, in their teenage years, they're gonna see way more Bitcoin in the news than probably any other traditional asset. They probably learn about Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin faster and even earlier than they learn about traditional stocks and other investments. I think Bitcoin today is absolutely the investment of the generation and for the future generation. And because of that, I think it's a very valuable asset to have in your own portfolio. And we have this recent drop of Bitcoin right now from 58,000 to 45,000. I think this represents a tremendous investment opportunity for the long run. Of course, in the short term, we may go even lower. We could go to 40 before the trend reverses and consolidates. But on a long-term basis, if you are to hold Bitcoin for 10, 20, 30 years, this price right now, it's a drop in the bucket. And that's really how I envision Bitcoin. I don't really think that realistically we could reach something like 500,000, as a lot of people have said, for this Bitcoin cycle in 2020 or 2021. I don't think that's realistically possible because we're simply not there yet. But in the future, we will get there because this asset class is just starting right now. And given this investment hypothesis, I'm probably going to make other videos, future videos on other investment hypotheses, and we can go deeper into other Bitcoin hypotheses that I have, which includes, corporate treasurers buying, which includes the investment settlement of Bitcoin, and has to do with the, Bitcoin, the digital gold, Bitcoin narrative comparison. We're going to talk about all of that in future videos, but in this one, I just want to get this idea and get this message out there because I think it's a tremendous, valuable asset for this generation and for the next generation. And it's for the people who never invested into the cryptocurrency market, who probably don't understand a ton about blockchain technology and its implications. Here's my advice. I would say just try it. Just take 2% of your cash, put it into Bitcoin. Okay, which is the safest crypto asset you can own today. Compared, it's way safer than Ethereum. It's got a lot more traction by the institutional investors. Tons of hedge fund managers are on this, right? It's way safer than other options you could have bought. It was your money in terms of crypto assets. But just put 2%. Okay, heck, just 1% of your cash into this crypto asset. Put $200 in it, put $1,000 in it, and see what it can do for you, right? You don't have to commit and sell your house or take out a loan, take out a home equity just to put it in Bitcoin. And that's very risky, by the way. I never advise anybody do that because we're talking about an asset class in its infancy, and it's extremely volatile. It's not very regulated still, so don't do that. But just 2% of your cash, right? I mean, it's whatever cash that you have on hand, it eroded away. 2% get eroded away every year with inflation, anyways. Put it into Bitcoin, see what it can do for you, right? Try it out, because even if you just put 2% of your cash into Bitcoin every year, and you build up a portfolio like this, in 20 and 30 years, you're looking at Bitcoin holding than a lot of other people. I guarantee you, because the majority of the investors, retail investors, and people who invest in sophisticated instruments like options and futures, and who have maybe a couple $100,000 of stock portfolio, they have yet to catch up with Bitcoin. I have a lot of intellectual friends, and my friends are young people. They're not actually, none of these people I'm talking about, with the exception of a few, are over 30 years old. But still, a lot of these people have not jumped into Bitcoin yet. They still have not made the first step in opening an account and depositing fiat money and transferring that money into Bitcoin. And just goes to show you, and these are very financial literate people. They are very smart people, and they understand the internet very well. They are very savvy user of the internet. Everything, they probably use like smart technologies a lot, IoT technology, but they have not got on the train for Bitcoin yet. Because yes, there's a lot of FUD, as we say, the uncertainty and negative news in the market from time to time. And then there's events like this where Bitcoin dropped by 25% in 2 days. Okay, these are kind of scary to most people. But what I'm saying is just put a little bit of money into Bitcoin, right? And lastly, as we see with any adoption of an asset class, people are changing. It's not constantly just going one direction. Some people have flipped their views, right? One of the greatest example is Michael Saylor of MicroStrategies. I mean, this guy has raised approximately, I believe, $1 billion in US dollars strictly for the purpose of purchasing Bitcoin. And he purchased it under his public company, a public entity. About just a few years ago, Michael Saylor was bearish against Bitcoin and these crypto technologies, right? And he flipped his view from probably a big bear in the market to one of Bitcoin's biggest bullish proponents right now. And very obviously someone who has a lot of authority in what he does, because he actually put his money and his company's asset and his reputation on the line to make this happen. And we have other people that we see. Ray Dalios have turned around, right? Paul Tudor Jones, who is also a very famous hedge fund manager, have said buy Bitcoin when Bitcoin was a couple $1,000s. It was like 6,000 when he said to buy Bitcoin, right? We have other people who have turned around as well. Jordan Belfort was another example. Jordan Belfort said Bitcoin was a scam, it's a pump and dump, it's going to zero. It didn't go to zero, and it almost went to zero. Bitcoin went to something like 4,000 from 19,000. So he was right. There's pump and dumps in a sense, but look where Bitcoin is now, right? And Jordan Belfort has turned around. He said he was wrong about Bitcoin, and we have other examples like that, right? Mark Cuban was another great example. Mark is a very intelligent investor, very sophisticated investor. He knows a lot. He's one of the few people who actually walked away with a couple $1 billion from the dot-com bubble. Made a lot of money from that. Sold everything at the right time, and he even, for the shares that he was not able to sell, he even used options, very advanced strategy to hedge his position, to lock in his profit. What I'm saying is, people are changing. We're seeing more investors being converted from bears to bulls. We're seeing and keep in mind, these are still the last generation's minds. Paul Tudor Jones, Ray Dalio, Mark Cuban, Jordan Belfort. These are the people from last generation, right? And they're in the power position today because they're 40 and 50 years old. They worked their whole life to get where they are today. They hold a lot of the monetary values in today's economy. They have assets worth probably billions to trillions of dollars under their control, under their management, under their influence. But that power is going to shift to the younger generation. It's going to shift. Today's 20s and 30s years old. These people are going to become 40 and 50 in 20 and 30 years. And they are going to be in control with all the money in our monetary system. And after this generation passes, the next generation, who are kids, who are 10 years old and 20 years old. Now these kids are going to be in the power position one day. They are going to be 40 and 50 years old someday. And they are going to be in control of 90% of, maybe even more, of the monetary asset of today's economy. What I'm saying is that we see this trend. This trend is shifting from people who don't believe in cryptocurrency, crypto assets, blockchain, and Bitcoin to people who do believe in it. And this portion of believers, it's only going to increase as time goes by, right? What is money, essentially? Money is shared belief that something has value. And isn't that exactly what Bitcoin is, right? I mean, for people who are bearish about Bitcoin because they think that Bitcoin has no value. We've seen this argument popped up from time to time. It's much less now than 2017, but still we see some big central bankers and institution investors who bring up this argument that Bitcoin has no value. There's no utility of it. You can't do anything with Bitcoin. You can't even pay transaction with it because the fees and the time is so inefficient. Takes so much energy to mine Bitcoin. Is destructive to our environment. But to which I reply, isn't that what the fiat money is as well? I mean, what value does fiat money has? The value of the fiat money is the government says it has value. The government has put their sovereign authority behind it. They say that this fiat money, this $1, it's worth $1. But what most people don't understand and don't see is that $1 of US dollars, it's not the $1 of US dollars from 10 years ago. Right? We know about inflation. We know about the real value of the dollar. It's not in the denomination itself. It's in the purchasing power behind the dollar. Sure, right now, today, the dollar still has tremendous amount of value, right? Even though the 1/5 of the money supplies in the U.S. is printed in the last 10 months. 1/5, by the way, that's a huge number. But I don't think the hyperinflation, some people would say, is going to happen anytime soon because the U.S. is still in a dominating position and their currency, like it or not, is still the reserve currency around the world and still has that value. It's still as good as gold, even though it's no longer on parity with gold. It hasn't been that way for many years. But, and I digress. What I'm saying is the U.S. dollar today still has its value, but we cannot guarantee that for the future. Yes, there are mechanisms in place. The U.S. government could have a significant amount of influence over the value of the dollar, but they are just something that's outside of their control here. And I do think that with more adoption coming up, we're going to see more corporate institutions buying Bitcoin, especially Bitcoin, and we are going to see perhaps some government agencies buying Bitcoin. Because one thing we know for sure is that the later you get into the Bitcoin cycle, I'm talking about the broader cycle lasting, this generation, next generation. The later you get in on the cycle, the less portion of Bitcoin you own, which means that you don't have as much of a purchasing power locked in with a specific amount of Bitcoin because the value of Bitcoin is going up in terms of fiat dollars, right? The central bankers and governments and these big players in our current monetary system, they don't like to be left behind. They attacked Bitcoin before because they were scared of this technology, how the money of their own country capital can just flow very easily to another country. But now they have gradually from 2017 and onwards, they started to understand this technology more. Now we don't have governments that just coming out and say, we're going to ban Bitcoin. They don't ban Bitcoin anymore because now they understood it. They know that you can trace Bitcoin. It's not totally anonymous, it's pseudo-anonymous. You can still use sophisticated audit technology to find out who these big players are, who are transferring money from where to when. So they don't ban Bitcoin anymore. And we're seeing that they understand it more. And we're seeing that they're seeing that other people are buying it, right? And I think a misconception is that institutional investors and governments and central banks don't have FOMO. I don't think that's right. I think everybody has a degree of FOMO. The central bankers and the government agencies, they may be more rational than the traditional retail investors. However, it's wrong to say that they don't have FOMO. They're run by humans. And all humans are driven by the same biological drives, the same emotions and energies. And if one government, all it takes, I think, is just one government agency from perhaps a country that has a bit of a monetary issue, countries who are currently suffering from from hyperinflation, suffering from deflation, devalue of their currency. I'm talking about countries, maybe something like Argentina, maybe some South American countries, to their central banks and their government to start buying something like Bitcoin. And all it takes is one spark. And around the world, this is going to bring the attention to all the central bankers around the world. It's going to be on the top of their agenda. How much Bitcoin can we get? Because we don't want to be left behind. Especially for countries like the U.S. government, like some of the big economies around the world, they really don't want to be left behind because they can't control Bitcoin. It's not something that they can mint. It's not their dollar. It's like the gold rush. How much gold can you get in your own country's reserve? Because the more the other countries get, the less that you get. So, anyways, topic for another video. I'm going to talk more in depth about my other hypothesis and my other investment thesis on Bitcoin. But for now, let's leave it at that. I think that this Bitcoin we're looking at, it's a tremendous investment opportunity for the next generation, and just put some money into Bitcoin. Really, it's no harm's done. 2%, 1% of your cash. I mean, you lose that money with inflation anyways, right? And lastly, before I end this video, I just want to say, even though I've said this is what I recommend you guys doing, I don't know the specific situation of anybody. And I'm not an investment advisor. I'm just a guy sharing my views about Bitcoin and my investment thesis. So please do not take this as investment advice. As we know in the crypto world, really be responsible of your own asset, of your own investment, and most importantly, your own financial future. So do some research and think about it. I'm just merely here giving someone a suggestion, some information, a unique perspective that I offer about Bitcoin. All right, guys, cheers, and I'll see you in the next video.